Welcome to episode 312 of the Shared Security Podcast. And this week we have several great stories for you, including a discussion about a new law in Ohio, so Ohio is my home state, that aims to require parental consent for kids under the age of 16 to use social media sites. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons and, of course, the privacy ramifications of that new law. And then in our Aware Much segment, Scott's going to talk about Meta's new link history feature. And if you do decide to use this, why you might start seeing more ads show up on Facebook and Instagram. And I know Kevin's not here, unfortunately, but I know he likes ads. I personally don't, but you may be of the type that likes ads. So this might not be bad for you. And then we're going to finish up with a fascinating story about a judge in Scott's hometown of Ottawa.
Yes.
Who said 3 smartphones from an alleged pedophile must be returned because 175 million passcode guesses were attempted on those devices without success. Yeah, that's just crazy. So that'll be an interesting story for sure. But first, I do want to welcome my esteemed co-host, Mr. Scott Wright.
Yes. Hi, Tom. Good to be here. Happy New Year. I didn't get to say that to you last week. I was off with COVID, recovered, but yeah, not fun.
I was going to say, I'm glad you feel better because COVID sucks. I remember.
Yes, it does.
Kevin and I mentioned that in the last episode, so glad you're feeling better. Kevin is not able to join us today because he is in his car. And I mean, I guess it would be fun to have him dialed in somehow, but we do not have the technical means to do that right now. So we're going to just skip on Kevin this week, but he'll be back with us next week. So
fair enough.
And I do want to give a quick shout out to one of our patrons, Robert McCurdy, who was kind enough to post a link to some refined AI-generated security awareness managers. So let me share my screen and let's just show this real quick because I think this is fascinating.
Refined in terms of AI, refined graphics, right? Refined prompts.
That's right. So these are much better quality, by the way, than what I had come up with. And if you missed
the whole start of this, it was because I was doing a little pitch for ClickArmor talking about don't let your security awareness managers suffer in silence. And so Tom and Kevin piled on saying, well, it sounds like we should have like an image of a security awareness manager in a dog pound. And so that's how this all started.
Yeah, these are really, really good. This back churned. These are really crazy. They get just, I don't say like more interesting, but they get pretty interesting.
So who do we thank for this?
So we're going to thank Robert McCurdy for that. One of our Patreons. So thank you very much, Robert, for that. And I do want to give him a little bit of a plug here. So he is offering free workshops on Android testing with Jamboree, and he's seeking other experts in encrypted payloads to advance this open source project that he has. So we'll have some links in the show notes where if you want to connect with Robert, you can definitely do that. Thanks again to Robert for supporting the show and appreciate those images. All right, well, let's go into our first story, which is the new law in Ohio that is going to attempt, and I say attempt with air quotes, to crack down on social media use among kids. And this law is actually going to affect next week, so January 15th. And there is some breaking news with this, actually. So just, I think yesterday, a trade group called NetChoice has sued the state of Ohio because they are saying that the social networks don't need to have the government basically tell them what to do. They have their own controls in place. And so this is obviously a lobbying group, right, for Meta and the big social networks. So that has been filed. But essentially, this is another state that is trying to enforce parental consent for anyone under the age, looks like 16 in this case, access to social media. So what do you think, Scott? Do you think this is going to be successful?
Well, I mean, we've seen things like this before that they get kind of bogged down, right, with judges saying, yeah, no, I don't think it's has the right standing, right? So it just doesn't really add up. And in a practical sense, I understand that the big platforms, Facebook, Instagram, etc., they're probably gearing up for more of this kind of regulation, but I imagine they're not going to do it without a fight because it will probably dampen their user base, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, this is just something that's really hard to do. I can see why the social networks are fighting against this because it's going to create them a lot more problems. We've seen the similar legislation that has come out about age restrictions to access like pornography, right, across the United States. And that has also had similar challenges as well in terms of, how do you validate someone's age? And then the privacy concerns of all that with, I have to upload my ID, I have to show my passport, I have to do all of these things. And now you are giving yet another third party this information. And I think it's even more concerning when we're talking about kids, where now you have to have the parental consent. Well, what do they have to do to show the government that, yes, this is in fact my 16-year-old and I authorize them to access the social media site?
Yeah, it's pretty heavy-handed.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Kevin is not here to give us his opinion.
Yeah, sorry.
And I know
I don't have a viral
say,
clip for this one yet.
Well, I know what he will say is, this is yet another overreach of the government to save the children, as he likes to say. But we'll see how this one plays out.
Yeah, the age verification thing is just so hard to do, right? I mean, I think there are technologies that are going to get better at it, but it's not practical right now.
So I'm interested to see if this does happen, like what is the process for age verification? I haven't seen a whole lot about what that's going to be yet, because right now the social media giants are kind of like, hey, we already have ways of doing this, but we'll see what the law actually tries to enforce.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started with everyone's favorite segment, Aware Much?
Yes, Tom, it's time to explore the deep, dark corners of the internet to make sure that our listeners are aware much. This story, in some ways, relates to the story that you guys talked about last week around link tracking in incognito mode within browsers. But this time, we're looking at how Facebook and Instagram apps are handling links that you follow from within posts to go to web pages. People don't think about it a lot. But when you click on a link in a Facebook or Instagram app, yes, you get to go view that page, but you're actually not viewing it from your standard default browser. You're viewing it from their native browser inside the app. And that's because they want to maintain control over the session and not let people go too far away. But if you want to go back later to reference a page that you viewed, when you were following a link on a Facebook page. I've actually had that happen once or twice where I think, where did I see that? And I think I got there from Facebook, and how did I get there, and how am I going to find it again? So, it's Facebook's now supporting this idea of link history, meaning you could go back and look at the places that you visited before from within the Facebook in our native browser, basically. So, Tom, do you think that this presents any kinds of new privacy issues, or is it sort of just shifting focus?
I think it's just yet another way that the social media companies look to target you with ads, and then they kind of wrap it up in a, pretty bow of, look at all the nice things that this can do by saving your link history, and you could go back now and access the things that you clicked on. And, I feel it's kind of masking their true intention, which is, we just want to serve you more ads.
Yeah, I mean, it may seem like a thoughtful feature to help people, but do you really think that it was not being done before? I mean, the apps are tracking everything, right? And so you were probably already being tracked from every link that you visited within the Facebook app or the Instagram app. But I guess the question then is, adding that feature, letting you go back and look at links that you had traversed before, that gives them more data because they can say, well, what links in your history were most important to you that you really liked?
Yeah.
And I guess that could cause you to be targeted with more ads from that point of view, right?
Yeah, exactly. One thing to note too is that you can disable this thing called link history. But the one thing to mention is that there is a potential 90-day delay in the deletion of those links. So that's already been called out. So if you think this is just like erasing your browser history, right? That's not the case at all. And I would just be cautious, right? That, this is one of many things that Meta is just going to track about your browsing habits, the friends you have connected to, what they're sharing to you, what you click on, like all of those things are being tracked and monetized in a way. So just something to be aware
as
of.
you guys discussed last week, the talking about browser histories, if you're even going to do security mode research, right? You should still assume that links that you follow are going to be tracked by somebody, even if, the cookies and everything else get wiped. So it's a similar kind of issue. Everybody's tracking everybody that they can right now.
Exactly. All about making the money.
So this installment of Aware Much was brought to you by ClickArmor, the only interactive security awareness platform built to help with special requirements like employee remediation, role-based training, even custom security awareness training content. And don't forget to join our live cybersecurity awareness forum panel discussions every second Wednesday by visiting clickarmor.ca/CSAF, and you'll be among dozens of security managers who are passionate about security awareness and security culture. And we talk about topics like acceptable use policies, Security Awareness Month, executive communications, and even gamification. So you can find it all. If you'd like to contribute or just lurk, that's great. Come and join us, clickarmor.ca/CSAF. And that's it for this installment of Aware Much.
So our last story for the week is police must return phones after 175 million passcode guesses, judge says in Ottawa. So there have been 3 cell phones that were seized from a suspected pedophile for more than 2 years. And apparently this person has been accused of uploading child pornography. So obviously as part of the evidence collection process, these phones were confiscated. But they were all protected by a complex alphanumeric passcode, which ended up being more than, 44
nonillion.
Million? Nonillion? Oh, that's right. Nonillion potential passcodes for each phone. Like, I don't even remember seeing the word nonillion.
I hadn't either, but I did some quick calculations, and it looks like they were saying 30 million guesses in 8 days. I'm not sure why they did it on that timeline, but so 4 million a day, let's say, right? So that implies maybe they had 2 months worth of attempts at it to this point. They said they've had the phones for 2 years, so I don't know how that adds up. But even if you could guess 30 million a day, that if you divide that into the 44 nonillion number that they put in, it's like 250 years that it would take to go through the entire set of potential characters, right? And so the judge in this case ruled, you know what? You've done an infinitesimal amount of brute forcing, and you're asking for 2 years, which is going to give you another little bit more, but you're still, I counted 7,000 times off. You're still going to have to do it 7,000 times longer to try and catch the actual code. So yeah, it's an interesting decision, basically saying you've tested enough on this phone, you should give it back now.
Well, the good news is that the court ruled that the investigation can continue without the phones. So they have other ways of getting the information or the evidence they need for a prosecution. But it's very interesting to hear that, usually you hear about these things where the phones have the passcodes, either broken into or Face ID, but kind of being manipulated right on an iPhone where, they just hold the phone up to the person. And of course, there's some interesting legal ramifications of that, right? Like where your police technically can't do that. But it's interesting to me to see in this case in particular that they just kind of gave up and said, no, we just can't do it. I'm also curious to know is like, you're obviously using brute force to do that. And there's a million different tools out there, I'm sure, or forensics capabilities, but were they using the right type of tool? Because I know there's a lot of things with like the NSO group and other types of exploits we've talked about in the past where you'd be surprised how easy it is sometimes with the right amount of money and tools and techniques that you can pretty much break in anything.
A couple of things come to mind. First of all, we're cheap Canadians, right? They're not going to go out and buy.
That's got to be it.
And it could be an ethical thing, within the force. There's, the whole ethical thing about, doing bribes in foreign countries. It's a similar kind of thing. Like, do you employ this kind of invasive technology to crack mobile phones? I don't know anything about the laws or the moral codes of these organizations, but that could be, one of the reasons why it was decided that, we should continue on. And, from everything we've seen in history, the real detective work is what finds the bad guys, not cracking an encryption code, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen like it does in the movies.
No, it definitely doesn't. So, well, interesting story for sure. All right, Scott. Well, I think that is all we have time for today.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and thanks to our Patreon supporters.
Yes, and if you would like to support us on Patreon, you can get all that information through sharedsecurity.net/supporter, which will take you to our Patreon page, and your support would be greatly appreciated. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. If you'd like to help support the podcast and get early access to new episodes with no ads, plus many more exclusive benefits, become an official supporter of the podcast for only $5 a month. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.